G'day everyone. Today, I've got a story that you'll really want to hear. So go on, settle in and pour yourself a nice, strong cuppa. My channel is all about the magic of storytelling, and I want us to enjoy this incredible tale together. Alright, at the quiet command from Senior Constable Kate Wallace, the Kelpie walking beside her, Rusty, pricked his ears. The metal tag on his collar caught the sterile light of the airport terminal. Glinting for a moment, this was Sydney International Airport. Terminal 1, a place where people from all over the world gathered, and then departed. The weekend chaos was at its peak. The rumble of suitcase wheels on linoleum, the multilingual announcements over the PA system, and the excited chatter of people filled with hope and anxiety, all swirled together under the giant, curved roof. For Kate, this scene was just another day at the office. For over 20 years, she had guarded this gateway to the nation. Her eyes were trained to spot the slightest abnormality in a person's gait. A nervous glance, a bead of sweat where there should be none. Beside her, Rusty was her perfect partner. He could detect what her eyes couldn't see, the faint, unique scent of human deceit and malice. In the 4 years since they'd been paired, they had prevented countless incidents. Rusty was more than a dog, he was an extension of Kate's own senses. A loyal partner with whom she could communicate without a single word. Just a nice, quiet one today would be good, mate, Kate murmured, more to herself than to the dog. It was in that exact moment that everything changed. Rusty, who had been calmly trotting half a step behind Kate, froze dead in his tracks. His nose twitched violently, and a low growl rumbled deep in his throat. Kate felt the change instantly through the lead. The fur on his neck stood on end. His muscles bunched and went rigid. What is it, Rusty? What have you got? Kate's gaze followed the direction of his intense, unblinking stare. Standing there was a young, pregnant woman. She wore a tasteful navy coat, one hand resting gently on her swollen belly. She looked like any other expectant mother, full of hope for the new life she was about to bring into the world. But Rusty saw something else. The next second, with a force that nearly tore the lead from Kate's hand, Rusty lunged forward. He let out a series of sharp, frantic barks that sliced through the terminal's noise. Woof, woof, woof. The bustling terminal, a place that should never know silence, suddenly fell quiet in that one spot. Every single pair of eyes was now fixed on the big, barking Kelpie and the terrified pregnant woman frozen before him. Ah! The pregnant woman, her name tag read Chloe Anderson, let out a short scream and crumpled to the floor. She wrapped her arms around her stomach protectively, her beautiful face twisted in a mask of fear and despair. No, stop it, please, make it stop. Her tearful plea instantly won the sympathy of the surrounding crowd. Oi, what's that copper doing? Is she serious? Setting a dog on a pregnant woman? That's a bloody disgrace. Get that dog off her, mate. The voices of condemnation stabbed at Kate like knives. People raised their smartphones, others rushed to security guards. In a heartbeat, Kate had gone from a guardian of the peace to a monster threatening an innocent mother. She pulled desperately on the lead, trying to wrap her arm around Rusty's neck, but he continued to bark as if possessed. His amber eyes held a strange light, a mixture of what looked like terror and fierce determination. Kate's mind went blank. Why is Rusty doing this? The woman in front of her was, by all accounts, someone to be protected, not targeted. Humiliation and confusion paralyzed her thoughts. This was the biggest crisis of her career. No, it was more than that. Her fundamental trust as a human being was crumbling beneath her feet. Surrounded by a wall of angry faces, Kate was forced to make a choice. Should she trust the inexplicable warning of her partner, the dog she had trusted with her life for years? Or should she follow common sense and protect this weeping woman who was begging for help? Her future as a police officer, and her pride as a person, all hung on the decision she made in this single moment. Just hours before this chaos, Kate and Rusty's day had started with its usual quiet routine in a modest house in Sydney's suburbs. The morning sun streamed through the window, gently illuminating Rusty's bed on the floor. As Kate got ready for her shift, the familiar sound stirred him. He slowly got up, stretched, and let out a big yawn. Morning, Rusty, I'm counting on you today, mate, Kate said. Rusty trotted over and rubbed his big head against her leg. The feel of his coarse fur was the best kind of therapy for Kate. Her husband had passed away years ago, and her only son was now grown and living interstate. In this quiet house, Rusty was the only one waiting for her to come home. They weren't just a handler and a police dog. They were a family without words, comrades in arms. Their pre-shift ritual was a patrol through the local park. Amidst the morning mist, Rusty walked in perfect sync with Kate's pace, sniffing the damp asphalt. When Kate stopped, He stopped. When she started to run, he followed instantly. There was no wasted movement. It was the result of years of rigorous training and the unspoken understanding forged in countless real-life situations. Their bond had been tested more than once. 3 years ago, during a threat against a major international summit, it was Rusty who had saved the day. Out of hundreds of pieces of luggage, he had stopped dead in front of a single suitcase that gave off a unique scent, and sat down quietly. The bomb disposal unit defused the device with just 3 minutes to spare. Kate often thought that if it hadn't been for Rusty's calm signal, she wouldn't be alive today. Another time, during a raid on a drug syndicate's safe house, the main suspect took his own young daughter hostage. As the standoff dragged on, Kate gave Rusty a signal with just her eyes. The dog moved without a sound, circling around to the back. The moment the man's attention wavered, Rusty lunged and sank his teeth into the man's arm, with just enough force to restrain, not to maim. In that split second of opportunity, Kate apprehended the man. Rusty never harmed people needlessly. Kate trusted his judgment and his loyalty more than anyone's, even more than her own. In the police car on the way to the airport, Rusty lay quietly in his crate in the back. He watched the scenery fly by, his amber eyes calm and filled with a deep intelligence. "Hope it's a quiet one today," Kate said, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Rusty gave a soft snort, as if to say, "No worries, mate, I've got your back." And so their patrol at the airport began. As usual, Kate read the flow of people, while Rusty read the flow of scents. But then, it happened, a tiny, almost imperceptible change. As the automatic doors to the departure lobby slid open, a wave of humid outside air washed in, carrying with it something strange and unidentifiable. Rusty's nose twitched. For a brief moment, he stopped walking, sniffing the air as if trying to solve a puzzle. Kate noticed the hesitation but quickly dismissed it. "What's up, mate? Getting hungry?" she joked, scratching him behind the ears. The airport was a cocktail of a million smells: perfume, food, chemicals, and human sweat. It wasn't unusual for Rusty to react to something. Rusty quickly seemed to settle down and began walking beside her again. But deep in his eyes, the earlier calm had been replaced by a faint glint of high alert. It was the quiet prelude to the nightmare that was about to begin. A silent, yet certain, omen. The glass automatic doors slid open, and a woman appeared. Unconsciously, Kate's eyes were drawn to her. Chloe Anderson, as she would later learn her name was, seemed to stand out from the surrounding chaos as if she were an actress under a spotlight. A high-quality navy wool coat elegantly draped over her heavily pregnant form. Her glossy black hair shone in the light, her face partially hidden behind sunglasses. She carried 2 shopping bags from a high-end department store. Her entire demeanor screamed of a woman living a comfortable, affluent life. Most people would have looked at her with a smile, perhaps a touch of envy. A Madonna-like figure carrying new life in the midst of a mundane airport. But Kate's 20 years of experience, her cop's instinct, detected a tiny, jarring note in this picture of perfect motherhood. Something was off. Other travelers were looking at the flight boards, chatting with family, or scrolling on their phones. Their movements were natural, lived in, but her movements were different. They were too calculated, too polished. She walked with her back perfectly straight, taking slow, deliberate steps as if on a stage. There was none of the slight waddle or sway in the hips that was characteristic of heavily pregnant women. It was an almost unnatural beauty, like a ballerina playing the role of a pregnant woman. Kate's gaze shifted to the shopping bags in her hands. They were pristine, the corners still sharp. She carried them with extreme care, making sure they never touched her body. Most people handled their carry-on luggage more casually. She was treating them with an excessive caution, as if they were filled with fragile glass. And then, Rusty began to show clear signs of agitation. He had been quietly sniffing the air beside Kate, but now his head snapped up, his nose twitching furiously, once, twice, and then his body went completely still. He was like a hunting dog that had found its prey, every muscle tensed, his entire being locked onto one target, Chloe Anderson. "Easy, Rusty, wait." Kate tightened her grip on the lead. But Rusty didn't move. He remained pointed towards the woman, as if receiving some signal beyond the range of human perception. Chloe was about to join the queue for the security check. She nervously adjusted the front of her coat. In that instant, Kate saw it. From behind the sunglasses, Chloe's eyes darted around, sharp and assessing. It wasn't the look of someone anxious about the screening process. It was the cold, hard look of someone checking if they were being watched, checking if their plan had any flaws. A heavy lump of suspicion settled in Kate's stomach. "What is it, mate?" she thought, directing the question to her partner. As if in answer, Rusty emitted a low, guttural growl from deep in his throat. It was a clear and definite warning. Kate's heart began to pound. Rusty never reacted without a reason. Explosives? Drugs? A hidden weapon? But the target was a pregnant woman. Common sense, logic, screamed that it was impossible. Yet, her intuition told her that this woman possessed something that defied all common sense. Chloe presented her boarding pass to the airline staff. At that very moment, the icy light in her eyes met Kate's gaze for a split second. It was the moment the mask of the Holy Mother slipped. What on earth was she hiding under that coat? Rusty's warning was now escalating beyond Kate's control. The low rumble from his belly grew louder, transforming into a clear threat that made nearby travelers turn their heads in confusion. Kate pulled hard on the lead, trying to use her leg to block Rusty, but the determined force of a 30-kilogram kelpie was immense. Rusty's paws were planted firmly on the floor. He refused to budge. "Rusty, no, sit." Kate's stern command didn't reach him. His amber eyes were fixed on one spot, Chloe Anderson's abdomen. It wasn't the look of aggression towards prey. It was something more urgent, more desperate. It was as if he was issuing a final warning to an unseen enemy hiding within. Chloe Anderson noticed the intense stare and was visibly shaken. Her hand holding the boarding pass trembled, and her conversation with the staff became distracted. She kept glancing back nervously, a picture of a pitiful victim in everyone's eyes. "Senior Constable Wallace, what's going on? Your dog's getting agitated," a junior officer called out, his voice tinged with concern and a hint of doubt about Kate's abilities as a handler. "It's fine, it's under control," Kate replied, though a cold sweat was forming on her forehead. The situation was anything but fine. Panic began to cloud her judgment. Why was Rusty so obsessed with this one pregnant woman? Was it the shopping bags? No, his gaze was clearly fixed on her body, on her midsection. Was he just overreacting to the specific hormonal scent of a pregnant woman? No, that was impossible. Rusty had undergone specialized training to distinguish between those scents and the scent of dangerous substances. He would never make a mistake like this. Chloe finished her check-in and started walking towards the security gate. As if mocking Kate's powerlessness, Rusty finally escalated his warning to its final stage. Woof, a single, sharp bark that overwhelmed all other sounds. It was no longer a threat. It was an alarm bell, a signal of an emergency. The surrounding crowd gasped. Chloe's shoulders jumped in shock. She turned around slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. What is it? What did I do? Her trembling voice was filled with enough tragedy to capture the sympathy of the entire crowd. Kate was trapped between a rock and a hard place. On one side was Rusty's absolute warning. On the other was the giant wall of social convention. Which one should she trust? And which one should she abandon? A voice from her earpiece, her superior, was yelling at her to get the situation under control. Kate's heart was beating like an alarm. There was no more time. The woman was about to pass through the gate. Once she was on the other side, Kate couldn't follow. And then Kate saw it. For just a split second. Behind the tear-streaked, trembling face of Chloe, the corner of her mouth twisted into a faint, cold smile of victory. No, it can't be. Rusty barked again. This time, it was completely different. It was a high-pitched, desperate sound, a plea. It was as if he was begging Kate, "Please, you have to see it. There's no time." It wasn't an attack. It was a supplication. He was trying to tell his owner, with his entire being, that an absolute evil was right there, and it could not be ignored. Kate understood the desperate urgency in that sound with painful clarity. The atmosphere in the terminal was about to boil over. "Someone stop that officer. My kid is scared. Apologize to her." The crowd's angry shouts rained down on Kate from all directions. It wasn't born from a sense of justice, but from the mob mentality of wanting to eliminate something that was different. Something that was disturbing the peace. A forest of arms holding smartphones rose up. Countless lenses aimed at the evil cop and her vicious dog, who were tormenting a helpless pregnant woman. "Senior Constable Wallace, do you copy? Subdue your dog and leave the area immediately." "That's a direct order." The commanding voice of her inspector in her earpiece was a final ultimatum. Her junior colleagues just watched from a distance, none of them offering to help. She was completely isolated. In the center of it all, Chloe Anderson was playing the role of the tragic heroine to perfection. She sat slumped on the floor, clutching her large belly, letting out choked sobs. "Please, just stop. I have to protect my baby." Her words were the most effective spell to fan the flames of the crowd's protective instincts and amplify their hostility towards Kate. Kate's body trembled with humiliation. The uniform she had worn with pride for 20 years now felt as heavy as a convict's rags. But deep beneath the anger, her mind was becoming ice cold. Rusty was still barking. His voice was getting hoarse, and foam was flying from the corners of his mouth. But he would not stop. He did not know how to give up. His determination lit the final spark of defiance that had been smoldering deep inside Kate. I decided to trust him. Didn't I? Has he ever lied to me? Not once. If I back down now, who will uncover the truth? Kate slowly raised her head. The confusion and panic in her eyes were gone, replaced by the quiet, steely resolve of a woman who was prepared to lose everything. She took one step, and then another, towards the trembling Chloe. The crowd yelled, "Don't you go near her," but their voices no longer reached her. "Ms. Chloe Anderson?" Kate's voice was surprisingly calm. "I'm sorry, but based on security regulations, I must ask you to accompany me to the secondary screening room." The color drained from Chloe's face. For a fraction of a second, her true expression, one of pure terror, peeked from behind the mask. But she quickly covered it with a look of righteous indignation. "No, why should I? I'm just a pregnant woman. This is a violation of my human rights." Those words were the trigger. Kate switched on her radio, and in a voice that boomed from the depths of her soul, clear enough for the entire terminal to hear, she declared, "This may constitute an abuse of authority. Any and all consequences will be borne by me, Senior Constable Kate Wallace, and me alone. But I cannot, and will not, let this woman pass." It was a declaration of war, a declaration that she was betting her entire career, her social standing, everything she had built, on the trust she had in one single dog. Kate gave a sharp order to her stunned colleagues. "Secure her. If she resists, it's obstructing a police officer. Arrest her." The terminal froze, but for a different reason this time. Everyone was speechless at Kate's outrageous actions. Her career as a police officer had, for all intents and purposes, just ended. Whether a shining truth or an irreversible ruin lay ahead, even Kate no longer knew. All she knew for sure was that she had just pulled the trigger. The heavy metal door of the secondary screening room clicked shut, and the noise from the terminal faded away as if it had never existed. In its place was the low hum of the air conditioner, filling a cold, sterile space. Only 3 people remained in the sealed room: Kate, a trembling Chloe, and a young female officer as a witness. The air was stretched as tight as a bowstring. "This is a clear violation of my rights. I'm calling my lawyer," Chloe said, her voice shaking but her tone firm. Her eyes were teary, but beneath them was a strong, unbending will. She was no longer a helpless victim, but a tragic warrior standing up against unjust power. Kate said nothing, simply staring at her. She had no evidence. All she had was Rusty's strange warning and her own gut feeling. It was a fragile, uncertain foundation. If she found nothing, her actions would be written off as a moment of madness. A dishonorable discharge was almost certain. Everything she had built would collapse like a sandcastle, the weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders like lead. From outside the door, she could hear an intermittent scratching sound. It was Rusty, clawing at the door, and occasionally, a desperate, whining cry, as if encouraging Kate not to give up. Or perhaps, still sending out a final warning. "Ms. Anderson, please cooperate. This is for your own good as well," the young female officer said in a gentle, by-the-book tone, but her eyes couldn't hide her distrust of Kate and her confusion at the bizarre situation. She was another person who couldn't understand Kate's actions. "Cooperate? After this humiliating treatment, you have the nerve to say that? I am pregnant. If something happens to me or my baby because of this stress, can you take responsibility?" Chloe's words were perfectly logical, and logic was sometimes the sharpest weapon. The young officer was lost for words and looked away from Kate. Kate's spirit was being worn down. Slowly but surely, was her judgment truly correct? Was it just a delusion, a fantasy born from years of occupational stress? The black fog of regret began to creep into her mind. Kate looked at the department store shopping bags on the table. The contents had already been through the X-ray machine at the main security check. Nothing suspicious had been found. "I'm going to have to check your hand luggage again." Kate's voice was hoarse, surprising even herself. With a feeling of prayer, she reached for the bags. Inside were neatly folded baby clothes, toys, and a feeding bottle. They were, by all appearances, items chosen with love by a mother for her soon-to-be-born child. She picked them up, one by one. Nothing. Was she really wrong? Kate picked up the last item, a baby bib, and that's when she felt it. Something was sewn into the hem of the bib. Her fingertips detected a small, hard object under the fabric. A tiny, almost microscopic chip of what looked like stone, catching the light in a strange way. An opal, a tiny fleck of Australian opal. Kate's heart began to beat violently again. Why would there be a hard stone chip here? What mother would deliberately sew a foreign object like this onto something that would touch her baby's delicate skin? What did this mean? It was a single, thin ray of light in the darkness. But whether it was the light of hope, or the entrance to despair, no one yet knew. The small opal chip Kate had discovered was an incredibly subtle anomaly. "What is this?" Kate asked in a low voice. Chloe's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, but she quickly composed herself into a sorrowful expression. "Oh, that. It's a good luck charm. A friend from Cuba PD gave it to me for a safe delivery. I sewed it onto the corner of the bib so it wouldn't touch the baby's skin directly." "Are you even going to suspect something like that?" The answer was perfect. As an act of a loving mother, it was not unnatural at all. In fact, Kate, for doubting it, seemed like the crazy one. The accompanying female officer sighed with unconcealed exasperation. Kate ran the opal chip through a special scanner, but the result was negative. It wasn't an explosive, not a drug, not a tracking device, just a piece of stone. Her last hope was gone. A cold sweat trickled down Kate's forehead. "I think that's enough," Chloe's voice echoed in the quiet room. It was the calm pronouncement of someone who knew they had won. "Please don't torment me and my unborn child any longer." A large tear rolled down her cheek. This wasn't the panicked tear from before. It was a tear of sadness from being treated unjustly, mixed with the strength of a mother protecting her child. It was a tear that would move the heart of anyone who saw it. Kate couldn't say anything in return. Her sense of justice, her years of experience, and her trust in her partner, all of it crumbled before this woman's tears. "I may have just made an irreversible mistake." A bottomless despair consumed her. To have publicly humiliated an innocent pregnant woman, to have deeply wounded her both mentally and physically, that fact was enough to shatter not just her career, but her pride as a human being. I am so sorry," she managed to choke out. It was a declaration of her defeat. The female officer, relieved, rushed to Chloe's side, patting her shoulder. "It's all right now." Kate could only watch the scene unfold, dazed. Chloe gently wiped her tears with a handkerchief offered to her. And then, for a split second that no one else noticed, a faint, yet distinct, smile of relief touched her lips, as if celebrating that everything had gone according to plan. But before that smile could fade, something went terribly wrong. Chloe Anderson's face changed color. The blood drained from it, turning her beautiful complexion a deathly pale. "Ugh!" She let out a short groan and suddenly clutched her abdomen with both hands. Beads of sweat popped out on her forehead. "What's wrong?" the female officer asked, alarmed. My stomach, it hurts." Suddenly, Chloe's voice was filled with agony, and her body began to tremble violently. This was clearly different from the tears of a tragic heroine she had been shedding earlier. This was genuine, raw pain. Was this an act, or was something truly happening to her? Kate's confusion reached its peak again. If this was also part of her calculation, what was the goal? And if this was real, it meant she had pushed this woman into a life-threatening crisis. Either way, hell was waiting for her. The atmosphere in the room shifted from relief to sharp tension and panic. "Ugh, ah!" Chloe Anderson's cries of agony were now so real that they could no longer be mistaken for an act. She slid from her chair to her knees on the floor, curling up around her large belly. Her back arched in spasms. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, as if she were having a hyperventilation attack. "Stay with me. Someone call an ambulance." The young female officer was in a complete panic, repeatedly pressing the emergency button on the wall. Kate stood frozen to the spot. She felt the blood draining from her own body. "It's my fault. I'm the one who pushed her to this." The black emotion of guilt swelled in her head. If she and her unborn child were in mortal danger because of her, this was no longer a professional error. It was tantamount to murder. The justice she had believed in was now, right before her eyes, threatening a person's life in the most heinous way. "Senior Constable Wallace, don't just stand there." The female officer's scream snapped Kate back to reality. With trembling hands, she grabbed her radio and reported the emergency to control. "Medical emergency in secondary screening room 2. Pregnant woman complaining of severe abdominal pain. Need paramedics and a doctor. Now." Within minutes, the door to the room burst open and airport paramedics rushed in. They efficiently checked Chloe's vitals and placed her on a portable stretcher. "Her blood pressure is dangerously low. She's in shock. Losing consciousness." The paramedics' urgent voices hammered mercilessly at Kate's eardrums. Chloe lay limp on the stretcher, her eyes closed, her face as white as wax. An oxygen mask was fitted over her face, and an IV needle was inserted into her slender arm. Kate couldn't look away. Was this the result of the justice she believed in? Did she trust her partner and throw away her career just to bring about this worst-case scenario? Her heart was so completely shattered by regret and self-loathing that she felt nothing anymore. She was just an empty shell, staring at the disaster unfolding before her. As the stretcher was being carried out of the room, Chloe, who should have been losing consciousness, faintly opened her eyes. She reached out a hand towards Kate as if asking for help. And in a barely audible whisper, she said, "Please, the baby." Her voice broke off mid-sentence. "Save." The last word was not spoken, but Kate heard it clearly. It was the cry of a mother's soul, using her last ounce of strength. The words became a sharp blade, mercilessly carving into Kate's heart. Amidst the rubble of her shattered sense of justice, all she could do was stand there. The high-pitched wail of a siren echoed across the grounds of Sydney Airport. The ambulance carrying Chloe Anderson sped towards the affiliated General Hospital, its lights flashing violently. In the back of a trailing police car, Kate Wallace stared at the palms of her own hands. The guilt of what she had done still felt raw and real. The hospital's emergency department was a scene of controlled chaos. Incoming from the airport, possible placental abruption. Prep the OR, now. Get me obstetrics and general surgery down here. Stat. Nurses shouted orders as Chloe was wheeled on the stretcher down a corridor and disappeared behind the doors of an operating theater. Kate was not allowed to follow. Beyond those doors was a sacred domain she could not enter. She sat on a hard chair in the waiting room, watching the minutes tick by. Each minute felt like an hour. In the corner of the hallway, Rusty, who had been brought to the hospital with her, lay on the floor, looking worried. The ferocious barking from earlier was gone. He was now quiet, but still tense, his eyes fixed on the doors of the operating theater. After what felt like an eternity, the light above the theater door went out. A doctor emerged, his face etched with exhaustion. His white coat was dotted with specks of blood, a testament to the battle he had just fought. Kate shot to her feet. "Doctor, is the baby, are they all right?" The doctor looked at Kate intently. His eyes were filled with deep confusion and the shock of someone who had just witnessed the unbelievable. He chose his words carefully before speaking. "Please, calm down, Senior Constable. First, the patient's life is no longer in danger. It was a critical situation, but the procedure was successful." Kate felt the strength drain from her entire body. "Oh, thank God." But the doctor's next words would shatter that relief completely, revealing a truth so shocking it defied belief. However, the doctor paused, then continued in a tone of disbelief. "She wasn't pregnant." "What?" Kate thought she had misheard. "What is this doctor talking about? What about her belly? It was huge? What do you mean?" "We also initially suspected a ruptured uterus, but the ultrasound didn't show a fetus. What was inside her abdomen was an extremely well-made silicone prosthesis. A fake womb. A fake womb." The words refused to register in Kate's brain. A fake pregnancy, a fake motherhood, then the tears, the pain, what was all that? As if recounting a nightmare, the doctor delivered another shocking fact. And that fake womb wasn't just a simple model. It contained a small mechanical pump to simulate a fetal heartbeat. And in its hollow cavity, dozens of small capsules were hidden, packed tightly together. Kate gasped. She felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. The contents of the capsules? The doctor looked at Kate with pity in his eyes and stated quietly but clearly. A high-purity liquid narcotic, most likely heroin, or something similar. In the sterile theater, what the surgeon's scalpel had cut open was not the cradle of life. It was a demonic vessel, filled with human greed and malice. The case had just taken on a horrifying dimension that was far beyond anything Kate could have imagined. The doctor's revelation was so surreal it far exceeded Kate's comprehension. A fake womb, a simulated heartbeat, and a massive stash of drugs hidden inside a woman's body. It sounded like something out of a twisted spy movie. But the doctor's serious expression and the raw smell of antiseptic wafting from the operating theater told her this was terrifyingly real. The reason she collapsed was that a part of the prosthesis had ruptured, causing the liquid narcotics to leak into her abdominal cavity. The doctor explained. The leaked substance was absorbed through her peritoneum, triggering acute poisoning. If it had been discovered any later, she would have certainly died. As Kate listened, the scattered puzzle pieces in her mind began to click together, forming a horrifying picture. Chloe Anderson's flawless performance as a pregnant woman, the unnaturally careful way she handled her luggage, and that tiny opal chip sewn into the baby bib. "Doctor, were there any non-metallic components in that fake womb?" "Yes. The control board for the pump that simulated the heartbeat used a chip that emitted a very weak radio frequency. Probably for someone to monitor its status externally. It must have been that chip, not the opal, that was setting your dog off." There was no doubt. What Rusty had been reacting to so violently wasn't just the leaking drug scent. It was this weak radio frequency, undetectable by humans, and the unique chemical smell of silicone and narcotics mixed together. Rusty had recognized all of it as an abnormal, life-threatening presence. He wasn't trying to expose her as a criminal. His desperate barks weren't an attack. He was trying, with his entire being, to tell everyone around them, "This person is going to die if you don't help." He didn't care that she was a drug mule. He had simply sensed, faster and more accurately than anyone, that a human life was in immediate danger. Kate stumbled over to the corner of the hallway where Rusty was quietly waiting for her. She slowly knelt down in front of his large body. "Rusty," Kate's voice trembled with gratitude and deep remorse. "You were right. You were always right. You were the only one who saw the truth. And I didn't fully trust you. I'm so sorry, mate." She buried her face in the thick fur of his neck. The coarse texture and the warm, animal scent seemed to soothe her guilt-ridden soul. Just a little. Rusty said nothing, but simply licked the tears from his owner's cheek with his large tongue. As if to say, "It's all right, no worries." An empty cradle. What she had been carrying was not the hope for a future, but a poison that led to death. Along with an unshakable gratitude for her partner, Kate felt a quiet but bottomless rage begin to burn inside her, a rage towards the faceless criminal organization that would use a human being as such an inhumane tool. This case wasn't over. No, the real fight was just beginning. Kate clenched her fists and slowly stood up. There was no longer any trace of doubt in her eyes. The next day, Chloe Anderson, moved from the ICU to a private room, woke quietly in the afternoon light. Her body was still weak from the anesthesia, and a raw pain emanated from the surgical incision on her abdomen. She gently touched her now flat stomach. The heavy, loathsome lump was gone. A sense of relief, and an indescribable emptiness, washed over her. The door to her room opened quietly. It was Kate, dressed in civilian clothes, no uniform, no lead, and no Rusty in sight. She stood there simply as a middle-aged woman. Chloe stiffened in surprise. This was the woman who had pushed her into hell. She should be an object of hatred. But strangely, no feeling of hatred arose. Instead, the moment she saw her, it felt as if a tightly wound string inside her heart had finally snapped. "How are you feeling?" Kate's voice was gentle. The moment she heard it, tears began to stream from Chloe's eyes. These were not the performance tears from the airport. These were real tears, a mixture of fear, regret, and despair, all the emotions she had suppressed deep inside her heart. I didn't want to do it," she sobbed, and the truth began to spill out in fragments. Chloe Anderson was a single mother from a small, struggling town in regional New South Wales. Several years ago, after a series of devastating droughts, her family farm had fallen into massive debt. Her young son was also diagnosed with a serious heart condition that required incredibly expensive surgery. While she was at her lowest point, a man named Victor approached her through an acquaintance, offering good work. "At first, they just said I was transporting special medical supplies," she explained. "They said if I looked pregnant, customs checks would be easier. They promised to pay for my son's entire surgery." I believed them. But just before she was due to travel, she overheard a conversation. She learned that she wasn't carrying medical supplies, but high-purity liquid narcotics, and that other desperate mothers like her were being used as mules all over the world. I was terrified. I tried to back out, but it was too late. They sent me a picture on my phone, of my son walking home from school. They said if I quit, they couldn't guarantee what would happen to him. I didn't have a choice." Her voice became a whisper, a mother's despair, forced to participate in a devil's scheme with her child's life hanging in the balance. Her confession was so painful it tightened Kate's chest. Chloe was a criminal, but she was also undeniably a victim created by a vicious criminal organization. Kate listened silently. When Chloe had finished, exhausted from crying, Kate asked quietly, "Is this organization still active?" Chloe nodded weakly. Then, mustering her last bit of strength, she revealed a shocking piece of information. "Yes, today, right here at Sydney Airport, another woman, just like me, is scheduled to arrive on a flight from Europe. She's supposed to meet one of the bosses in the arrivals lobby." Those words were the starting gun for a new battle. A sharp light ignited in Kate's eyes. What she had to protect was no longer just the law. The future of this woman and her son now rested on her shoulders. Chloe's confession lit a new fire inside Kate. This was no longer just about her duty as a police officer to enforce the law. This was the pure, righteous anger of a human being who could not forgive the despicable evil that preys on the vulnerable. Her lost sense of justice, the one that had almost crumbled, was now being rebuilt inside her. stronger and more certain than before. This fight was no longer about restoring her own honor. It was a fight to save a mother and her son. And it was a fight for her own pride, to prevent this country from being further tainted. Kate left the hospital room and immediately contacted her superior, Inspector Davies. On the phone, she calmly but passionately reported the whole story and the new information she had obtained from Chloe. And so, Inspector, the second mule is arriving today on a flight from Madrid. This is a golden opportunity to take down the entire organization. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Kate's unauthorized actions had thrown the airport police into chaos just the day before. The issue of her disciplinary action was still unresolved. Logically, there was no way she should be given any further investigative authority. Wallace, what you did yesterday was completely unacceptable. The inspector's voice was stern, but its tone had shifted slightly. But, it is also a fact that your partner, Rusty, ended up saving a life and uncovering a major crime. The top brass can't ignore that achievement. The inspector let out a deep sigh, then made his decision. All right, but this is not an official operation. It's a covert, internal investigation conducted by you and a few officers you trust. If you fail, this time you're really finished. Understand? Yes, sir, thank you. It was the best possible answer Kate could have hoped for. She immediately assembled a small team of trusted plainclothes officers, members of the elite specialist response group, and of course, her best partner, Rusty. The location was a briefing room at the airport. On a whiteboard, she wrote down the fragmented information from Chloe, the flight number, the estimated time of arrival, and a vague description of the senior member they were looking for, codename Victor. Wore an expensive suit, and likely had an official airport staff ID card around his neck. The information was scarce. They had to find one pregnant woman and one syndicate boss among the thousands of people in the vast airport. All they could rely on was human observation and Rusty's superhuman senses. Kate addressed her assembled team with a powerful voice. This will be an unprecedented takedown operation inside the airport. We don't have many resources, but we have something they don't, an unshakable will to see that justice is done. The deadline was just a few hours away, before the plane carrying the target landed on the tarmac at Sydney Airport. Kate patted the head of Rusty, who was sitting beside her, as if sensing his owner's resolve. Rusty stared back at her, his amber eyes unwavering. The lonely fight that had started with one woman and one dog was now about to become the counterattack of a small team against a great evil. At 3:45 p.m., the international flight from Madrid touched down smoothly on runway B at Sydney Airport. The international arrivals lobby was crowded with families waiting for loved ones and travel agents holding up signs. Kate, Rusty, and several plainclothes officers blended into the crowd, holding their breath and waiting. Kate's heart was pounding like never before. What if Chloe's information was wrong? Or what if the organization had learned about yesterday's incident and changed their plans? Every possibility raced through her mind. But there was no turning back now. Passengers began to emerge one by one from the customs area through the arrival gates. Kate's eyes scanned the crowd for a pregnant woman, but no one matching the description appeared. A slow trickle of anxiety ran down her back. Just then, Rusty, who was sitting beside her, tensed up. He raised his nose high, trying to catch the scents flowing from beyond the gate. Is she here, Rusty? Kate whispered. Rusty let out a low growl. There was no doubt, it was that smell, the same foul combination of silicone, chemicals, and a faint radio frequency that he had detected from Chloe Anderson the day before. And then, finally, the woman appeared. She was dressed in a long grey coat, a large scarf covering half of her face, but there was no hiding her swollen abdomen. She looked around nervously as she walked slowly through the lobby. Rusty didn't bark. Kate had given him strict orders beforehand. Instead, as the target woman walked past them, Rusty quietly but firmly sat down at Kate's feet. It was the final signal. That was the one. Kate switched on her earpiece microphone. Target confirmed. Woman in the grey coat. Move in. At that short command, the plainclothes officers scattered throughout the lobby moved as one. A man leaning against a wall. Another reading a newspaper, a woman pretending to be on her phone. They silently but swiftly surrounded the target. The woman realized something was wrong and tried to run, but one of the strong SRG officers grabbed her arm firmly. Federal police, you're under arrest. The lobby erupted into chaos. Screams from passengers, shouts from officers, but this was not the chaos of condemnation that Kate had faced yesterday. This was the chaos of hope, of justice crushing evil. Just as the woman was secured, Kate spotted a man emerge from behind a pillar and hurry away. An expensive dark suit, an airport staff ID card around his neck, There was no doubt, the syndicate boss. "Stop!" Kate yelled. At the same time, Rusty shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. The man saw him coming and started to run for his life. But a human's legs were no match for a highly trained Kelpie. Rusty caught up to the man, but instead of biting his leg, he simply blocked his path, barking loudly and authoritatively. Woof, woof. It was the triumphant bark of victory. The man was quickly apprehended by the other officers. When Kate saw his face, she gasped. He was a senior manager for a major logistics company that handled cargo at the airport. They had an insider. All the dots were now connected. Kate knelt and powerfully stroked the head of Rusty, who had proudly returned to her side. The tables had been turned, and their victory was absolute. The story of the incident swept across Australia the next day. Television news programs ran the story of the Sydney airport bust as their top item. Hero Kelpie busts international drug ring. The unbreakable bond, the dog and the officer WHO saw through the pregnant mule. Sensational headlines like these were plastered across the front pages of newspapers and online news sites. Public opinion, which had just yesterday condemned Kate as a cruel officer with a vicious dog, did a complete 180, now hailing them as heroes. Rusty's popularity, in particular, was immense. The story of the brave, intelligent, and loyal Kelpie captured the hearts of the nation. The AFP headquarters was flooded with letters of thanks and gifts for Rusty from all over the country. A few days later, a special commendation ceremony was held, attended by the Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police. Kate stood there, a little shy, but with her chest puffed out with pride. Beside her sat Rusty, looking perfectly calm with a specially made medal around his neck. Camera flashes went off like lightning, and applause thundered through the room. Rusty remained unfazed by the commotion, only occasionally glancing up at his owner's face. Many people gathered around him, trying to pet his head. "Good boy, you're a hero, thank you, Rusty." Surrounded by such praise, Rusty never wagged his tail or tried to court favor. His demeanor was filled with the quiet dignity of a seasoned warrior. Kate stood slightly apart from the crowd, quietly watching her partner's profile. A hero, that's what people called him. But to Kate, Rusty was just Rusty, her stubborn, food-loving, and irreplaceable family member who rubbed his head against her leg every morning. "All this fuss is probably just annoying for you, isn't it, mate?" Kate thought to herself. As if hearing her thoughts, Rusty smoothly slipped away from the crowd and returned to her side. And just like he always did, he rested his big head on her lap. That was enough. No words were needed. Between them flowed a quiet, deep bond that no one could ever disturb. After the ceremony, a letter arrived for Kate. The sender was Chloe Anderson, who had been discharged from the hospital and was now in police protection. In trembling handwriting, the letter was filled with words of gratitude. "Dear Senior Constable Wallace, and to Rusty. Because of you both, I have been freed from a nightmare, and I have been able to speak with my son in my faraway home again. I've been told that his surgery is now scheduled. The tears I shed at the airport that day were tears of lies. But the tears I'm crying now, as I write this letter, are real tears of gratitude. Thank you so much." The letter ended with this: "One day, when I have paid for my crimes, I hope I can thank you and Rusty, my lifesaver, in person, with my son by my side." Kate quietly folded the letter and put it in her pocket. She looked up at the evening sky. The sky was burning with a beautiful orange, as if washing everything clean. The hero's profile was calm and serene. When all the commotion had passed, normality returned to Sydney Airport. Kate and Rusty were back on their patrol duty, but the way people looked at them had clearly changed. Airport staff would give them a respectful nod as they passed, and some travelers would secretly take photos of them with their smartphones. Rusty had become a celebrity at the airport, or rather, a kind of guardian deity. At the end of their shift that day, Kate and Rusty sat on a bench on an observation deck in a quiet corner of the airport, a place where people rarely went. In front of them, the vast runway stretched out endlessly. The setting sun bathed the fuselages of the parked aeroplanes in a warm orange glow. "Well, it's over, mate," Kate murmured. Rusty let out a soft whine. Kate took a piece of Rusty's favorite beef jerky from her pocket and offered it to him. Rusty took it happily but gently. "You earned about 100 of these for that effort," Kate said with a laugh. Stroking his head, Rusty closed his eyes in pleasure. They sat in silence, just watching the sunset. The hero who had saved many lives and crushed a great evil didn't want any special reward. Just to be able to spend a quiet moment like this, next to the owner he trusted, that was the greatest reward of all for him. Kate slowly reflected on the events of the past few days. Human lies, weakness, and evil, but at the same time, human conscience, regret, and redemption. She had witnessed both sides. What is justice? What is evil? Perhaps there are no easy answers. But, she thought, this partner next to her doesn't worry about such complicated things. He doesn't judge things based on good or evil, profit or loss. He simply acts without hesitation, following the truth told to him by his own senses and instincts. That pure, straightforward soul that humans seem to have lost, perhaps that was the only light that led them to solve this case. We sometimes get fooled by what we can see, don't we? Kate said, as if talking to herself. Job titles, appearances, the tears people cry, but not you. You see right through all that, to what's real underneath. You didn't see a criminal. You saw a person in danger. You didn't attack, you warned. That's your strength. Real strength isn't about power. It's in the heart. As if he understood her words, Rusty gently rested his head on Kate's knee. The solid weight and warmth spoke more eloquently than any words about the depth of their bond. In the distance, a plane roared to life and ascended into the night sky. Its red tail lights twinkled like beacons of hope, lighting up the future. Before disappearing, Kate watched it until it was gone. Come on, mate, let's go home. Kate stood up, and Rusty rose beside her. As dusk settled, the shadows of one woman and one dog stretched out long as they walked slowly towards the car park. Their battle was over, but their quiet, daily duty of protecting this nation would continue tomorrow, and the day after, and always. He doesn't need a special title. Guided simply by love and loyalty, he is there, quietly, today. The story concludes with their calm figures walking into the twilight.